All right, good afternoon. Just wanted to give you some updates on the attacks that took place in Central African Republic yesterday. Our colleagues at the UN mission report that the search for the missing peacekeeper continues in collaboration with local actors in Mbumu and Bangassou. Further to what we said yesterday, there are now 10 wounded soldiers, including 9 Moroccans and 1 Cambodian. 7 of the wounded are in Bangui at the UN mission's Level 2 hospital. 5 of them have minor injuries, and 2 of them have more severe injuries that are not life-threatening. 3 of the wounded are at the UN mission's Level 1 hospital in Bangassou and are being treated for light injuries. This is regrettably the biggest attack in the Central African Republic so far. Earlier in the day, the President of the General Assembly, Peter Thompson, arrived in Bangui on a pre-scheduled trip and visited the wounded peacekeepers at the UN mission's military hospital. He was accompanied by senior officials from the Central African Republic, including the President of the National Assembly and the Prime Minister, as well as Parfait Onyango, the head of the UN mission. The President of the General Assembly paid homage to the fallen peacekeepers and saluted the bravery and dedication of peacekeepers who often serve in dangerous and very difficult conditions around the world in the name of peace. And you will have seen the statement we issued last night on the attack, in which the Secretary General strongly condemned it and also added that the attacks against UN peacekeepers may constitute a war crime. The Secretary General also called on all parties to heed the call of President Archange Touadéra to cease violence and work together towards the stability of the country. And I was asked by one of your colleagues yesterday about the compensation for peacekeepers, for fallen peacekeepers. And I can tell you that as a rule, when a peacekeeper is killed in the line of duty, the families or legal beneficiaries receive compensation of $70,000 US. The compensation is paid to the government of the peacekeeper's country, which is then expected to certify to the UN that the funds will be transferred to the family. And the Secretary General arrived this morning in London ahead of the London Somalia conference, which, as you know, is taking place tomorrow. Today he addressed a crowd of close to 2,000 people, NGO members, academics, and the general public and others at the invitation of the UN Association for the United Kingdom. He told participants that the world is facing 3 main challenges today: the changing nature of the conflict, the fragility of political, economic, and ecological environments in many parts of the world, and mistrust and anger among those that globalization has left behind. To rescue multilateralism, he said, we need to have a strong commitment to reform multilateral organizations. On climate, the Secretary General reiterated that green business is good business and highlighted the necessity for the UN to make its case and continue to mobilize the whole of the international community. Finally, the Secretary General stressed the need to combat the fact that human rights agenda is losing ground to the national sovereignty agenda. And his full remarks are available on the webcast, or should be shortly. This afternoon, the Deputy Secretary General will leave New York for Vienna. Tomorrow and Friday, she'll participate in the Vienna Energy Forum, themed Sustainable Energy for the Implementation of the SDGs and the Paris Agreement, and meet with senior Austrian government officials, as well as the heads of the UN and staff of the UN system entities based in Vienna. She will also attend a high-level meeting on the implementation of the SDGs, hosted by the President of the Austrian National Council at the Parliament. And on the 12th and 13th of May, she will participate in the UN Climate Change Conference going on in Bonn, which is the meeting of the UN FCCC. She will meet there with the president of COP22, and also the presidency for the upcoming COP23, who's from Fiji. The Deputy Secretary General will also meet the mayor of Bonn, as well as the heads and staff of UN offices in Germany. And the Deputy Secretary General from there will travel to Doha on the 13th of May, where she will attend the 17th Annual Doha Forum as a special guest representing the Secretary General. The theme of this year's forum will be Development, Stability, and Refugee Crisis, and she will be returning to New York on the 15th of May. And the Special Envoy for Yemen, Ismail Ul Sheikh Ahmed, starts a new regional tour today. He arrived in Riyadh a bit earlier to attend a World Bank meeting on Yemen and meet with Yemeni officials and regional authorities. He will then attend the Doha Forum from the 14th and 15th of May, and also is expected to brief the Security Council by the end of the month. Meanwhile, according to the Ministry of Health, 14 cases of cholera have now been confirmed in several governorates, including Amanat, Alisima, Al-Mahwit, Amran, Al-Dail, and Sana, and that's since April 27th. The UN and its partners are taking immediate steps to assist health authorities contain the outbreak. This includes reopening 26 diarrheal treatment centers across 15 governorates and establishing 6 more of those centers in the most impacted areas, as well as sending medicines and supplies and strengthening the surveillance system. It's vital that pledges made by donors in last month's pledging conference are distributed immediately so that the UN and partners can continue essential and life-saving operations and respond to the urgent needs of the Yemeni people. And regarding Iraq, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the Nimrod Bridge, which is about 30 kilometers south of Mosul, is scheduled to reopen to vehicles today. It was open to foot traffic yesterday. The bridge has been closed since the 2nd of May as a result of the high waters following massive rains. Closure of the bridge has added further complexity to the Mosul response operation, forcing humanitarians to pre-position supplies on the western bank of the Tigris and find alternative channels for medical evacuations. And just since the beginning of the Mosul operations, military operations in October 2017, some 622,000 people have been displaced from the area. And from Libya, our humanitarian colleagues inform us that a scoping mission to Benghazi was sent yesterday to strengthen the coordination on humanitarian issues in the area and work on establishing more systematic humanitarian access to Benghazi. Humanitarian priorities identified during the mission are support to life-saving medical care, demining, psychosocial support needs, and comprehensive assistance to the internally displaced population in the area. This was the first visit to Benghazi in 3 years due to challenging security environment. Planning is underway for a follow-up mission in the coming weeks. And today in Geneva, the World Meteorological Organization opened its annual session with a focus on strengthening weather and climate services to protect lives, property, and the economy from increasingly extreme and unusual weather. The organization says that with extreme weather and climate conditions on the rise, it's essential to advance the global agenda on disaster risk reduction, sustainable development, and climate. And the meeting closes on May 17th. More information online. And today, millions of people around the world are celebrating the day of Vesak. The day acknowledges the contribution that Buddhism has made for over 2.5 millennia to the spirituality of humanity. And the Secretary-General's message is available online. And today is also, it's a flyby day. It's World Migratory Bird Day. Important day, which highlights the need for international cooperations to conserve these creatures and their habitats. According to UNEP, millions of birds migrate every year along the global flyways between continents, but many of them are facing steep decline in their population due to loss of habitat caused by land reclamation and changes in global agricultural practices as well as poaching. The theme of this year is Their Future is Our Future, a healthy planet for migratory birds and people, which is closely linked to the SDGs. More information, UNEP. Yesterday, I think it was you, Matthew, asked me about the formation of the new government in the DRC. And I can tell you the UN continues to encourage all Congolese stakeholders to implement the 31 December political agreement, including the establishment of transitional institutions envisaged in the agreement. And I just wanted to pass on a sad note that longtime UN staff member James Sutterlin died peacefully on May 8th. During his career at the UN, Mr. Sutterlin had worked as a speechwriter for Secretary General Kurt Waldheim, as director of the office for Javier Perez de Cuellar, and was instrumental and one of the lead authors in preparing Secretary General Boutros Ghali's influential report, An Agenda for Peace. And after retiring, he continued to work for the ideals of the United Nations, working at Yale to resuscitate the UN Oral History Project, which ultimately encompassed more than 200 interviews. And we send our condolences to Mr. Sutterlin's family. And tomorrow at 9:45, we've been asked to inform you by the Israeli mission that we expect Ambassador Danny Danon, the permanent representative, to answer your questions at the Security Council Stakeout. And at 2 p.m. right here in this very room, there'll be a press conference by senior officials from Argentina and the International Council for Small Businesses on the new initiatives to empower micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises as jobs of engine creation, innovation, and sustainable growth. The event is co-sponsored by the Mission of Argentina and the UN Office for Partnerships. Carol.
Stefan, does the UN have a view on whether the U.S. plan to arm Kurds in Syria is going to help or hinder the situation?
I don't have a detailed reaction, but just to say that our focus remains on finding a political solution to the current crisis, and we encourage all to focus on a political rather than to encourage to focus people on a political solution and support the ongoing Geneva process. Edie?
Other than
Edie?
Steph, does the Secretary General have any reaction to the election of the new president in South Korea and his new approach, including raising the possibility of traveling to Pyongyang, among other places, to try and revive the old sunshine policy?
First of all, we want to congratulate President Moon on his victory and the people of Korea on this election. The Secretary General will be writing to the President. I think hopes to be in touch with him as soon as possible. I think it's day one of the administration. We will obviously, as Secretary General said, continues his concern about the current situation on the Korean Peninsula, but I will leave it at that for the time being. Yeah.
Sure. I wanted to ask you about the Secretary General's London speech. Maybe I misunderstood just first. Did you say it's going to be put on the webcast?
It should be. Yeah, we're getting the video, and it'll be placed. If it's not already placed on the UN webcast, it should be there very soon.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, and maybe both. I'll see it when it comes out. There have been various summaries of. He was asked a question about Myanmar, and at least one written. Since there was not any live stream of it, I'm going off what people have tweeted about it. They said it's a complex decision when to speak out, says Guterres, citing need to work with government of Myanmar and criticize rights violations of Rohingya. So I wanted to know, can you unpack it a little bit? What is this balance? Does this balance apply to all countries that he's dealing with? Has he reached out to Aung San Suu Kyi to try to do quiet diplomacy about getting the UN team in and the Rohingya?
Yes, there have been contacts with Aung San Suu Kyi, and I think the balance is in everything we do. We need to stand by our principles, and we also need to work with governments. I'll admit to you, I was preparing for the briefing while the speech was going on, so I haven't had a chance to look at it, and I think whether you asking about it or me answering about it, I think both of us need to listen to the whole thing.
But were you able to? Okay.
Signore.
Is it the Secretary General encouraged by the work of Mr. Kobler in Libya?
The Secretary General continues to support Mr. Kobler in the work that he's doing. I think Mr. Kobler was in Algiers not long ago and continuing his work to gather support for Libya. Linda.
Thank you, Steph. This is following up on the Syria question. Mm-hmm. Does the SG have a point of view regarding the participation in the London talks, the participation of the opposition and Assad, while ISIS and al-Qaeda-linked fighters obviously who are relevant in Syria, are not participating?
Well, I think it's important that we continue to focus on the political solution. There is also obviously a needed security response to fighting terrorists, as we've seen around the world. It's important that that response be fully respectful of international law and international humanitarian law in order to avoid civilian casualties. The people who are represented in the Syria talks have all, I think, are committed, and we hope are committed to finding a political solution. And those who are committed are welcome at the talks. Mr. Lee.
Sure. Yesterday I'd asked you on South Sudan if UNMISS was aware of an attack on the convoy of the Vice President, Taban Ding Dang. Now there's been a pretty high-profile firing of the Defense Chief Paul Malong, who's been discussed in the Security Council as in terms of human rights violations. So I wanted to know, is UNMISS aware of these things? Does the government communicate to UNMISS, given the potential for violence caused by the
No, I mean we're obviously aware of the firing of the Chief of Staff. As far as what has been reported to us here, the situation in Juba remains unchanged from the observation that we're able to gather, remains calm. School and markets are open, and the international airport is operating as usual. But we're obviously continuing to monitor the security situation in Juba very closely.
Okay. And also in Darfur, it's the IDP Association has said that thousands of people have recently been forced out of their homes in Jebel Mara by government bombing. Since we don't hear that much about Darfur anymore over here, is UNAMID aware of it? Are they responding?
I'll check. I have not been. Nothing's been reported to me.
I have a WIPO question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. I wanted to ask you this. I'd asked you before about Francis Gurry bringing criminal defamation charges against a radio station in Geneva. Now the Government Accountability Project has put out a white paper on it, basically pointing out that the CEB, of which he's a part and the Secretary-General's a part, have talked about against this idea of using criminal defamation or even high civil penalties for journalistic work. Given that it was the general counsel or legal counsel of WIPO that made the criminal complaint, it seems like basically you have a member of the CEB operating totally against what the CEB says the UN should do. So at what point does the Secretary General, what's the purpose of these CEB statements if they're not
the purpose of the CEB is for coordinating the implementation of programs across the board to ensure that funds and resources are used in a coordinated manner. As you know, the CEB is a independent specialized agency with its own governing board. The head of the CEB of WIPO reports to that governing council. On the methods used, I think I've answered it, and it's not. It was not something that it's not a response of choice. Carol.
Stefan, I'm going to ask the question again about the Istana Agreement. I mean, it's been almost a week. Have you had a chance to look at it and specifically to formulate a view on monitoring?
We are continuing to read through the agreements, and especially, it doesn't have to be long to be complicated. Thank you.